Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only stream, links to the podcast, links to our social media sites where we simulcast the radio show every morning on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and, all the stuff you need to know about me, the show, etc., etc., etc. Good morning, and welcome to Tuesday. Tuesday. It is the deep dive day where we get a chance to kind of get into the weeds a little bit on some of the different issues surrounding the state. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets will be joining us here shortly this morning to discuss this and more. We've got three big topics for you today, including the fact that there will be no special session this year to talk about all the stuff that was left hanging from the last session, the Kabuki theater that is the Alaska Natural Gas Line project, and the fact that the Permanent Fund Corporation is opening an office in Anchorage, and that doesn't sit well with some people. And Brad will get into some of the details of his thoughts on that as well here in just a hot minute. In hour two, we'll recap some of the things that I come away with from Brad's discussion, and then we will be joined by Chris Story, the man from Homer, who will come in for our weekly life coaching lesson. That's right. We need it. We need a little bit of pick-me-up. We need a little bit of, after the beatings from Brad will continue, we will then get the positivity boost from Chris. Put some salve and some bandages on from the hot truth bomb that's going to be dropped in hour one. I don't know what Chris's topic is going to be today, but it's always good. It's always good. So I hope you stick around for that and enjoy it with us as well. Just another beautiful day in paradise. Foggy, rainy. It's like a walk in the clouds up here where I'm at. It's kind of crazy. But, hopefully we get a little bit more summer before we get too far along here. All right, well, we're going to get kicked off a little earlier than normal this morning. I always hate when I run up against the clock with Brad when we're running out of time and we end up compressing everything. So I thought we'd try something a little bit different today and maybe give him a little bit more time where we can sit down and kind of go through all three topics, maybe one topic per segment. And Brad has been kind enough to join us this morning a wee bit earlier than he normally does. I see him here in the chat room this morning, or in the green room. So let's jump over there right now and see what he has to say as we get things kicked off. Good morning, my friend. Are you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed? Are you ready to go?
Good morning, Michael. I usually have one more jolt of coffee before we hit it at 6:20, but I'm ready to go.
I know. I hit you a little. I just always hate squeezing into that last segment. We always just seem to get so squeezed. So I thought maybe I didn't talk to you about it. I just, I made an executive decision and said maybe I'll ask him just to come on a little bit early this morning. It'll spread us out just a little bit more. Brad, when you pick up these 3 topics every week, I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to it. Some people, may have questions or whatever, but it's always interesting stuff. It's always something that, that I had not been thinking of from a certain perspective. And of course, you bring your oil and gas perspective to it. But let's get started this morning on this topic of the special session, because we kept hearing that, there has to be a special session before the next one, because we got so many unanswered questions and so many things going on but now it looks like there will be no special session. Jeff Landfield over at the Landmine wrote about this on Sunday. What is what's going on here? Give us your take on what's happening here.
Well, Jeff wrote a piece. You could sort of see this coming in terms of what the governor was doing or not doing in terms of preparing for a special session. And there was the fact that during the vetoes that he did of the FY24 budget, he vetoed out the appropriation to cover the cost of the special session, which was sort of a big hint about this. But he had made a lot during his infrequent press conferences during the session about resolving the fiscal issue, and had gone so far as to say that he was going to propose a sales tax. He was prepared to propose a sales tax, and was pushing forward and said that he would push forward with a special session if it wasn't resolved, if the issue wasn't resolved during the regular session. To pick up Jeff's reporting on this, and this is from the Sunday Landmine, for those of you who are interested, to pick up Jeff's reporting on this, he says, but since the regular session, then the price of oil has been steadily rising, hitting $90 a barrel today. That was Thursday of last week. The first time it's reached that price since November 22nd. And significant disagreement remains between the House and the Senate on what kind of fiscal reforms are needed. Leaders of both bodies told the Alaska Political Report, that's Jeff's publication, that there is now little to no desire for a fall special session. While Dunleavy floated the idea of a special session earlier this year, a senior official from his administration told us the governor is not going to call a special session if the legislature does not want to do it. Dunleavy also vetoed money from the budget that would have paid for a special session, though it still could be funded in the supplemental budget. So basically, Jeff's reporting, and I've heard the same thing independently. Jeff's reporting is that the administration really has no desire to go into a special session now. Oil prices are up. It looks like the FY24 budget will be funded, and they're just going to let it ride for another session. The advantage of the special session this year was that it was outside of an election year, and there was a hope, maybe misguided, but the hope that legislators would be more responsible. They would look more long-term. They would be more susceptible to finding compromise in the same way that the Fiscal Policy Working Group did a few years ago, that they would be more prone to find a compromise to resolve the fiscal situation in a non-election year. If you don't call a special session this year, you push the issue into next year, into the next legislative session, and it'll be an election year, and nobody will want to move on. Everybody will be going to the barricades, to the mattresses on their issues, on fiscal issues, and nobody will want to be seen as compromising. So that's the loss of not going into a special session this year. There is one thing that really strikes me about this. Alaska is often said to have the strongest governor, the strongest powers for a governor of any state in the nation. And that's largely in part, because of the governor's line item veto powers in as number one. Number two, that it takes 4/5 of the legislature to override a veto on appropriations. So it gives the governor the view is it gives the governor a very strong hand especially with respect to fiscal issues. This governor has demonstrated that it's a weak hand. At least he's playing these strong powers as a weak hand. Because of the way in which the PFD arises, as decided by the Supreme Court in 2017, it's a legislative appropriation, and because the governor can't raise legislative appropriations, when the legislature shortfalls the PFD, the governor really can't do anything about it directly. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that other governors, strong governors, would have vetoed the budget and said, "Look, if you're not going to include the PFD, we're not finished yet. We're going to go back. We're going to redo the budget, and we're going to have a PFD in it." Others have pointed out that he could be selective in his vetoes and punish those legislators that vote for PFD cuts. That the governor has the power to be a strong governor with respect even to the PFD. But this governor has played those cards weakly. WEAKLY.
Almost both ways. Yeah.
Has played those cards, the cards he has dealt. If he really believes in the PFD, the governor has played those cards poorly and played those powers poorly. And the failure to call a special session, to lead on a special session and to call a special session, I think is just another demonstration of how weak he has chosen to play those cards. To defer, essentially to say, I'm not going to call a special session. I'm not going to try to lead if the legislature doesn't want to do it, is to essentially say, "Nah, legislature, you get to control this stuff. I mean, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I don't want to do it, and so we won't do it." And that's it's disappointing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is almost more at this point a commentary on the governor's overall performance than it is specifically on this one issue. This is just a microcosm of what the governor has been doing pretty much the last 3 years. I mean, he came out running strong, and it seems like he got, whacked and spanked pretty hard, and now he's been kind of like a whipped puppy the whole time. I mean, he ran on this platform of standing tall for Alaska, and he's going to do the PFD, but at every opportunity where he had the chance to take a stand and to stand tall and to make some things. I mean, you were just talking about vetoing the whole budget or portions of the budgets, forcing them back to the table. He's not willing to do that. And again, I'm not quite sure why. I mean, this is a lame duck session for him. He doesn't have anything else to do. I mean, he may have higher aspirations, but if you were going to take a stand, you should you could rally your base here for the strong pro PFD crowd and really put some work in, and nothing seems to be happening. And again, offering a sales tax, saying he's going to offer a sales tax and then actually never doing anything, saying that these things are going to happen and then backing back up. I mean, is this not, in your mind, an example of extremely weak leadership?
Well, it is. I mean, he's playing those cards weakly. I mean, we talked at the time of the election. We talked at the time the governor was reelected. We talked about the governor having an opportunity, the governor being at a fork in the road, right? He could either go for a legacy like Hammond and fight for the things he believed in, use the powers that the Alaska Constitution gives the governor, fight for the things he believes in to try to carve a legacy out. Or he could just continue to go along to get along and try to position himself as, somebody who talks a lot about federal issues, for example, as he does, and try to position himself for a Senate run somewhere down the road. And it looks like, in all honesty, it looks like he's chosen the second course. I mean, he's trying to avoid creating controversy, even among his base, and just push to get through the session, complain a lot about the federal overreach, file suits against the federal government. But when it comes to things that are really matter to Alaska families, like the PFD, just sort of let it go, just sort of roll over and play dead. And it's and that's the course he's chosen. So if the legislature is not going to call itself into special session, if the governor doesn't call itself into special session, then we're just going to roll into an election year, and we're not going to solve this issue next year either. I mean, oil prices are going to be up, or oil prices are going to be down. Even if they're down, even if it looks like we're hitting another crisis, another funding crisis, the legislature is not going to solve this issue in an election year. And so he's really he's passing up the next to last chance he has to really help resolve this issue by pushing on the legislature during a non-election year to come finally to grips with the fiscal situation we're in. One other thing has become apparent during this entire process, and that is to resolve the PFD issue, because we haven't gotten spending under control. To resolve the PFD issue, there's going to have to be some tax involved, some tax to pay for government and take the place of the PFD tax that we've been using to pay for government. There's a great case for doing that. I mean, the tax would have a lower impact on middle and lower income Alaska families. It would have a lower impact on the Alaska economy than PFD cuts are having. I mean, we talk about, there's a bunch of stuff in the papers about, Alaska wages going down, Alaska becoming a poorer state. Well, part of that's because we've been cutting the PFD. And there's a great case to be made for, let's get the PFD resolved. Yes, we're going to have to pay taxes for part of government, but frankly, that will act as a brake on the size and scope of government, because once you engage the top 20% in paying taxes, they'll push back on government spending the same way that everybody else has tried to. There's a great case to be made for, for substitute taxes in place of PFD cuts, now that we're at this point where we haven't cut spending. But the governor seems to want to avoid doing that. So another opportunity is passing us by.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. All right, we're going to move on to number 2 of the weekly top 3, which is going to be the Kabuki Theater of AKLNG. Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We return with more right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, I mean, I hate to be that guy sometimes, but this is what I was concerned about coming into this, in the last election for governor, was the prior performance of Mike Dunleavy in this kind of just absenteeism. I mean, it's just like he's not there. He's not engaging with the public. He's not participating. I mean, he released his vetoes without even a presser where he's, supposedly supposed to answer questions as to why he did certain things, according to the law and the Constitution. And he basically just sent it out with a press release and said, here's my vetoes. There's like zero engagement with the governor and the public, or pretty much anybody else at this time. And this is, I think this is indicative of a larger problem. But I mean, this is it. This is the core issue, isn't it?
Yeah, well, from a fiscal standpoint, this is the core issue. The PFD is the core issue.
Yeah,
resolving the PFD is key to the state budget. It's key to the state economy. It's key to the impact of state government on Alaska families from a fiscal standpoint, and it is the key issue. And he just doesn't want to face up to it. I mean, he tried. We need to give him that in 2018 when he came in, or 2019 when he came in that first session, he tried to reduce the cost of government, and the blowback from that, I think, scarred him, and has continued to affect the course of his administration ever since, both in the remainder of the first term and now into the second term. He doesn't like to engage on issues. He doesn't like to engage with reporters. He doesn't like to explain himself. He just sort of likes to do it and go on. It is sometimes it reminds me of a different system of government, a king and a prime minister, right? The king sort of sits in the castle and occasionally says stuff, and the prime minister is the one who really runs the government. Well, in this case, on fiscal issues, I mean, Bert's really the prime minister. I mean, Bert's really running the fiscal function of the government, and Dunleavy's just letting him. And it's a waste. It's a waste of the powers that the governor has. It's a waste of the constitutional role that the Alaska Constitution creates for our governor. The founders wanted a strong governor. The founders gave the governor powers to direct the state. And he's just sort of letting those atrophy during his term as governor. So it's disappointing. It's leaving an adverse impact on the Alaska economy. It's leaving an adverse impact on Alaska families. And I don't think it will serve him well if he has desires for additional office, and if he runs for additional office. I think people are going to bring up the fact that he didn't do what he said he would do during his terms in office, but
yeah,
that's what he's chosen to do.
I agree with that, and I think some of the listeners agree. Terry says, with his performance as a governor, I would not vote for him in another position. I mean, I think that's a valid point. I mean, if you're not going to stand tall for the things that you ran on as a governor, why would I want to vote for you for any additional offices that, if you can't even, because again, it's not like he fought and lost. It's like he's not even fighting for it. That's the worst part of this whole thing. And yeah, if he was so scarred from the first go around in 2018, 2019, why would you run for governor again at that point?
And he's leaving legislators dangling. I mean, Ben Carpenter, if I were Ben Carpenter, I'd be a little upset about what's happened. I mean, Ben got out there on the sales tax. Ben pushed the sales tax. Ben was a member of the fiscal study working group trying to resolve this issue, and the governor's just sort of left him dangling out there. And I'm not sure how legislators are going to react to, the governor continuing to just sort of, leaving them out there drifting around.
Yeah, it's disappointing to say the least right now as to what's going on. It's very disappointing, and we had hoped to see him, especially in a lame duck session, be able to do more. Wasted opportunities is what Donna says, and I would agree with that. All right, here we go. We're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Back with more. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, bringing the pain on this Tuesday of the Truth Bomb. Just talking about the governor and lack of fortitude and standing tall for Alaskans on the PFD and the special session issue. But now we move over to the latest, the Kabuki theater that is the Alaska natural gas pipeline. And we've talked about this in the past. AKLNG now, of course, making headlines. The latest article here from last week talking about conservation groups now suing to stop the Alaska LNG project. And Brad, you say this is all basically Kabuki theater at this point.
It is, Michael. The one headline that had some significance from last week about the AKLNG project wasn't about the AKLNG project. The headline was LNG Japan, which is a consortium of Japanese LNG purchasers, buyers, buys 10% stake in Australian natural gas project. And that reports on one of the Australian projects had the owner was looking for end users to become part of the consortium, that part of their LNG consortium. That's what producers, LNG producers, try to do. They try to get end users locked in as a part owner of the project, because once the end users locked in as a part equity owner of the project, they're much less likely to try to avoid the purchase contracts if they start going bad, because it would affect their equity position. So you try to get your end users in as part of the equity, part of the ownership of a project. And one of the Australian natural gas projects got LNG Japan, a significant participant in LNG purchases in Japan, to buy a 10% stake in their project. It doesn't read LNG Japan buys 10% stake in Alaskan natural gas project. Alaska has been marketing theirs for forever. It reads 10% stake in Australian natural gas project, and that I think is the most significant headline from the week. It demonstrates, I think, that what Japan's doing with the Alaska project is using it as a stalking horse, using it as a negotiating tool, using it as leverage. That if you don't do what I want you to do on your project, I can always go back to Alaska and look,
Right.
Rahm Emanuel and the Biden administration are trying to push me to Alaska anyway. I think it demonstrates, this sort of activity demonstrates that Japan's and others are really using Alaska as a stalking horse. But that doesn't mean the LNG project doesn't have any use. The headline in the Anchorage Daily News that you referenced: conservation groups sue to stop LNG project. A couple of conservation groups, the Sierra Club and Center for Biological Diversity, filed suit against the Department of Energy about a Department of Energy decision to approve exports from the LNG project. Their claim is that the Department of Energy had not fully assessed the climate and environmental harms. So if the project's really not a real project, I mean, if it's just a stalking horse, why are the environmental groups suing on it? And the answer is probably fundraising. The answer probably is,
I was going to say, they're probably using it as a stalking horse as well to raise. So, I mean, we're the whole thing. We're just the puppet for everybody around us at this point, right?
Yeah, that sort of is what sort of turns out to be the case. I mean, the Alaskans are trying to push the project, but nobody else really believes in the project, but they want to use it for their own particular purpose. I think with the Willow decision, the Biden administration's Willow decision, and the loss to the environmental groups and the conservation groups there, they want to keep the Alaska issue alive. And here's another Alaska project, and here's another federal approval that another Alaska project got. So let's go after that, and let's tell our contributors and tell our supporters that, hey, we're still going after Alaska project. So the whole thing about LNG increasingly to me is becoming kabuki theater. It's becoming, people sort of shadow puppeting moves that really don't have to do with Alaska LNG, but using it for their own purpose. The Japanese using it for the purpose of making it a stalking horse in their negotiations with other purchasers, the environmental groups making it a stalking horse in their fundraising efforts and in their efforts to show that they're out there, defending the environment. And the poor LNG project just sort of continues to spin on without making any real progress. I mean, it's possible at some point, they're going to have an announcement that says, hey, Japan buys a portion of the Alaska LNG project. And if that ever comes to pass, if that headline ever reads, LNG Japan buys 10% stake in Alaska, if that headline ever reads, buys a stake in Alaska natural gas project, then we're going to be talking about something that may have become real. But until that happens, I don't think we're just sort of spinning our wheels in the mud here, and I don't think we're really making any progress.
Well, and there's really a third group that's again using it as a stalking horse or as a money generation machine, and that is, of course, all the entities that are surrounding this, the non-governmental or quasi-governmental agencies that are spinning around this, soaking up the money. I mean, there have been millions and millions of dollars of public funds that have been expended over the last 30 years that I've been covering the issue of AKLNG that has been, oh, we're going to study it, or we're going to do this, or we're going to create a working group, or we're going to create a port authority, or we're going to do something. And they have consumed millions of dollars over the last 30 years at studying it or trying to pursue it or do whatever. That's a third group that's out there making a living essentially off pushing a quasi sentient project forward. I mean, that's what's happening right now.
Oh yeah, it's millions, it's hundreds of millions and billions probably by now if you go all the way back to the original start of the project. I mean, it's one of those things that you think makes sense, right? There's a lot of natural gas in the world, or there's a lot of natural gas up on the North Slope. There's a demand for natural gas in the world, and you would think that it makes sense to link one plus the other. But every time LNG every time the Alaska project sort of gets close, something happens in the marketplace. I mean, we were sort of close in the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007. Murkowski had pressed forward on the negotiations with producers. And then Palin came in and sort of broke the back of that and wanted to go a different direction. But at the time, the market in the lower 48 looked like it was going to be gas short. And the Alaska project suddenly made sense again. But then we had shale gas. Then we had the shale revolution in the lower 48, beginning in about 2008. And shale gas suddenly became prevalent in the lower 48. We now have Japan that's trying to get off other sources of supply for energy. We have Europe that got shut down by Russia, or shut itself off from Russia in response to the Ukraine war. All those sort of things make you think, okay, there's going to be an increased global demand again. The problem is there's a lot of global suppliers. I mean, there's Australia, there's Mozambique, there's Abu Dhabi, there's Qatar, there's, the list goes on and on and on of LNG suppliers. And sort of just like happened in the mid 2000s when shale gas exploded in the lower 48 and sort of destroyed the market for Alaska gas down in the lower 48, we've had this explosion of LNG supplies, LNG opportunities globally that are much better positioned and much more economic than Alaska. Doesn't mean Alaska doesn't have a use. I mean, the Japanese are using it as a stalking horse. The environmental groups are using it as a stalking horse. And you're right. The studies industry is using it as a reason to sort of continue on with all the studies. But it's not progressing the project forward. And in all reality, when you look particularly at this headline and look at the details of the agreement between LNG Japan and the Australians last week, it's just not it's not a realistic project that's staying together. It's much more Kabuki theater.
From your perspective as an oil and gas guy, I mean, oil and gas attorney, and being part of a lot of these deals and seeing this from start to finish, is there a path forward for Alaskan? Because you talk about, the market conditions, all of a sudden, market conditions are right for Alaska. It's good. We start talking about it. And then 6 months later, the market conditions change. But we know there's this long tail in building out anything that has to do with that. So is there any path forward for Alaskan gas to actually come to fruition where somebody realizes, the market conditions may be perfect today, or they may not be perfect today, but we know that in the future, this is going to be necessary. So we're going to commit to it. I mean, is there a path forward for Alaska natural gas?
Not in the free market, not in the capitalist system. The only path forward for Alaska natural gas, and I think Lisa recognizes this, and I think others have recognized this, the only path forward is huge government subsidies that support the project and make the project economics work, because the private sector isn't really having to pay for it. Government's going to have to pay. Government's paying for it. And I think that truly, if Alaska LNG would ever go forward, it would be on the backs of government funding, as opposed to on the backs of private sector contracts and private sector funding. So that's where it is. And you and I, think that's abhorrent, that we don't want the government interfering. We don't, even though it would be good for Alaska, maybe sort of in the short run, we don't want the government funding these sorts of projects. If the private sector doesn't think a project's worthwhile, then it shouldn't be done. But that's, I mean, there are gonna be people, including the studies industry that you talked about a moment ago. There are going to be people who continue to push forward for that and say, oh, it's important for Alaska to have this project. It's important for the world to have this project. It's another source of, free world supply to Japan, gets away from Russian supply. So it's important for the free world to have that. But the only way it goes, I mean, you look around the world at the LNG projects that are progressing and the amount of supply that's coming forward, and there's really not a place for Alaska. And so you look around the world and you say it's not going to happen. And then, people who want it to happen just keep pressing forward with more and more government funding. That's the success story for Alaska LNG, to have the government pay for the damn thing.
So we're sitting on 17 trillion cubic feet of gas, and we can't do anything with it. And it's maybe down the road, maybe years from now, maybe it will eventually come to fruition, but not looking forward here in the short term.
We're sitting on 23 trillion cubic feet of gas, but it's 700 miles from market.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah,
somebody talks about, someday the Bering Sea will melt enough that we'll be able to get it out by barge, maybe. But it's not an economic project. And the other problem, I mean, that people talk about now is the window is closing for LNG projects. That solar and other renewable sources of energy are coming on strong, and so the window's closing for the hydrocarbon market. And it takes a long time to pay these things out. Even if the government funds it, it takes a long time to pay these things out. So the window of opportunity for the project seems to be closing as well.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. That's number 2. Number 3 is going to be the discussion on the new Permanent Fund Corporation office that they're talking about opening in Anchorage. Looks like it's a go, and we will talk about the pros and cons of that and some of the infighting that appears to be happening as well on this. We will continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Brad Keithley, our guest. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I mean, I know they've talked about, liquefaction, shipping it via LNG containers from the North Slope. I know that they're going to be trucking some gas down to Hillcorp's building a liquefaction plant on the North Slope to truck it to Fairbanks and things like that. I mean, it's just kind of a crime that here in Alaska, we could potentially be importing LNG down in South Central because we just can't get our poop in a group and can't make it work out to get our own gas 700 miles away. We ship it 7,000 miles away over the ocean, and it's cheaper than it is bringing it out of our own backyard.
It is, Michael, but it's expensive to build the pipeline. It's expensive to build the kit to do it. So yeah, the economics ought to rule, right? If we can get gas cheaper by bringing it up from British Columbia, from an LNG plant in British Columbia, can get gas cheaper than we can by investing in a pipeline and bringing it down from the slope, then we ought to do that. I mean, why should we punish the Alaska economy by forcing it to pay more to support an Alaska LNG project when the Alaska economy can have lower energy costs by bringing it in from someplace else? I mean, it's the economics. The economics should control the situation. It's unfortunate in a philosophical sense. Yes, we ought to be able to use our own resources to supply ourselves, but if the economics don't support it, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't build a pipeline just because we want to find a use for our own gas. We should let the economics control the situation.
Is there something economical long term, or is it just not? I mean, where once it's built, then it becomes, over the course of a 50-year term, it becomes better and sustainable, or again, that's going to all require a massive amount of government infused money to make it work.
It's going to require a massive amount of government infused money. If there was an economic case for Alaska LNG where it made money over the long term, you would be able to find investors to do it. The state's done the right thing, I think, of trying to get the project up and showing what the project could be, showing what the kit that would be required, showing how you would extract the gas, how you would get the gas to Tidewater, how you would get it on LNG. I think the state probably has done a useful job of showing how you would use the resource. But the next step of the economics of then using it, finding the economics of using it, I mean, that's just a massive amount of money. It is, $40 billion. Let's see, when did they do that estimate? Back in 2020, maybe 2019? Well, no, it was before COVID. So anyway, a massive amount of money, $40 billion, probably $50-60 billion with inflation now. A massive amount of money to do the project. It's almost the size of the permanent fund, right? I mean, $40 to $60 billion is almost the size of the permanent fund. It would take the permanent fund in terms of money to build this project. And that's a huge investment. So if there was a case for how that played out and how you made money over the long term, I think a consortium of private investors would have come together and made it reality. But there just isn't. I mean, it's compared to alternatives, to the alternative of what's going on in Canada, Gulf Coast, elsewhere in the world. It just doesn't make economic sense.
So we remain a land bank for now, and maybe one day the metrics work out, but maybe technology increases, maybe demand, or maybe supply drops somewhere else. Maybe other basins are exhausted, and we look, maybe that's what it is. I mean, it's interesting to see and frustrating to a point, because we are a resource-rich state, and when we can't access our own resources to utilize them here, let alone sell them somewhere else, definitely a frustrating combination for sure.
I'll absolutely agree with that. It is frustrating. I mean, you see a bunch of gas, you see a market out there, and you go, we ought to be able to do that.
Right.
But it's the economics of getting it from there to there that just don't work. So
yeah, but just don't throw us all off.
Except for Kabuki theater, except for people who want to take advantage of, hey, it could happen. So.
Well, and again, people are making careers out of this. That's what kills me, is that people are making careers out of this idea of going back and spending massive amounts of government money to justify spending massive amounts of government money. And it's just like, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. That's for sure.
There you go. If we could find a way to tap into Japan's use of it as a leverage, and the conservation group's use of it as a leverage, we'd find a way to tap into the economics of that. We'd make some money off of it.
Yeah, we can leverage it. Maybe I need to start a new company. I don't know. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're getting ready to jump back into it here. Please like and share, like and follow the show. And please continue to stick around with us here. Let's get back to it. Here we go. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right, we're continuing with the weekly top three. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, comes in and dives into this thing with us to talk about the various issues around the state. Today, we're on to number 3, which is the new Permanent Fund Corporation office, which you wouldn't think would be that contentious, but it may have actually led to the departure of some people from the Permanent Fund Corporation. And more. There's some deeper waters here at play, Brad, in this whole thing. I think they're trying to do the right thing as far as being able to get the right people hired. And some people are so stuck in the old ways of Juneau is the only answer. Give us your take here on what's going on with this.
Well, this is definitely a Juneau versus Anchorage issue. The Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation has pressed forward on its, or is pressing forward on its proposed opening of an Anchorage office, and making that an alternative place of employment, and an alternative office for people who otherwise would be in the Juneau office. And the Permanent Fund Corporation is pressing forward on that, saying that there are people who they will be able to bring on board to an Anchorage office, who will live in Anchorage, who would not come on board to a Juneau office, and that justifies having an Anchorage office. I'm there may be good arguments for why they need an Anchorage office. That isn't one. The reason is that you don't say, you can't stop and say, oh, there's somebody we want that would be in an Anchorage office that wouldn't come to a Juneau office, and so that justifies opening an Anchorage office. You really have to go through an analysis of, well, who's the next best person that would go to a Juneau office, that doesn't need an Anchorage office, that would settle for a Juneau office, and is the difference between the talents of the person who insists on Anchorage and the talents of the person who would be satisfied with Juneau, is the difference between those two so big that it justifies opening a brand new office for Anchorage. And I doubt frankly that they can make that case. I would guess, knowing the industry, knowing the financial industry, knowing the investment industry, I would guess you're going to find enough people to go to Juneau that have enough talent that you can't really justify having Anchorage because somebody is so much better that they would only go to Anchorage, and you have to have an Anchorage office to accommodate this prima donna that would only go to Anchorage. Here's my concern with an Anchorage office, and it goes back to the in-state investment program that the Permanent Fund Corporation had for a moment. Juneau, as much as we like to complain about it from a legislative standpoint, being its own little weather, its own little
bubble.
Bubble. Thank you. It's not, that really doesn't harm it, I don't think, from a Permanent Fund Corporation standpoint. There's not a whole lot of private sector businesses in Juneau that go lobby, the Permanent Fund Corporation for investment in their projects. I'm concerned that there would be, that we would have that problem if we had people up in Anchorage. I'm concerned that a part of this is Anchorage people wanting to get their hands on the Permanent Fund, or businesses wanting to get their hands on Permanent Fund money, trying to get an office in Anchorage, and because it will be more available to them to push and to lobby and to develop relationships with people to push for in-state investments by the Permanent Fund Corporation. That's a concern that I have. I think there is an advantage, frankly, in the Juneau bubble from the standpoint of the Permanent Fund Corporation, because it's out of the ability of the Anchorage business community to push for
influence,
right? To push for influence over Permanent Fund investments. The other piece of this, I think it's just an Anchorage Juneau fight about, the governor is sometimes accused, probably rightfully, of trying to gradually move government. I mean, sort of like Sarah Palin, gradually move government out of Juneau into Anchorage, and this is just a piece of that. And there was the availability of some office space at Department of Environmental Conservation, and they said, oh, well, it doesn't cost us any in office space because the state would otherwise pay for it through ADEC. And so we're going to use that, and we got to buy some furniture and stuff like that. But it's really, I think the big battle is the concern about moving another piece of government to Anchorage. In the long run, probably doesn't make a big difference. We're probably not talking about a huge amount of dollars for office space, But I don't think the justification's there in terms of we've got to have this office for this unique individual who otherwise is going to make us zillions of dollars, but wouldn't come on board if we made him go to Juneau.
I mean, I guess the positives are it's essentially a net zero revenue. I mean, they don't have to pay for office space. They only have to pay for the equipment and the furniture. They're able to hire talent that may not want to be trapped in Juneau. They may want to come. I mean, I think there's some positives in that regard. But my question is, in light of everything that's happening today, and especially post-COVID, why aren't you just hiring people where they're at? Why aren't you just hiring people? It's not like these people have to be in an office face to face. I mean, a satellite office doesn't achieve that. I mean, it just means that they're 500 or 1,500 miles away in Anchorage versus Juneau. Why wouldn't you just hire them on the spot and allow them to remain where they're at? If the remote work is such a thing, why would this even be a big deal at this point? And then you had people actually quit inside the thing over this whole issue.
Yeah. Well, you want people in Alaska. I mean, if you want those dollars, those salary dollars or bonus dollars or whatever kind of dollars you're paying to these people, you want those in Alaska. You want them spent on Alaska real estate, spent on Alaska groceries, spent in Alaska restaurants, spent, traveling in Alaska. So you want to bring those dollars as much as you can into Alaska. Now, if there's some unique, as I say, if there's some unique individual that's going to make you $1 zillion, but refuses to live in Juneau, $1 zillion more than the next best, but refuses to live in Juneau, then okay, let's look at alternatives. But no one's made that case. I mean, what they've said is some people want to live in Anchorage. Okay, but are they absolutely saying they will not live in Juneau, A, and B, are they so much better than the next best person who will live in Juneau that it justifies the costs? But you do want them in Alaska someplace. I mean, you don't want them living in Chicago or Dallas or Houston.
Well, they talked about opening up a branch office or a satellite office in New York because they were trying to do that. So, I mean, there's some argument for some of those things, but again, I'm just scratching my head overall. This has been, again, the Anchorage Juneau problem from the very beginning, is that this is really a tug of war about where government resides in the state.
Yeah, and I think my point is there's some downside from it. I mean, if you put them in the Anchorage environment, you expose them to Anchorage, people who have great ideas about how to spend the permanent fund money on in-state projects. If you expose them to that environment, I'm concerned that there's a problem that we may get some dollars directed to Alaska projects that shouldn't go to Alaska projects just because we've put them in that sort of environment.
30-second final thoughts, Brad.
It's fun to watch it. It's sort of, Kabuki. It's another Kabuki theater between Anchorage and Juneau, but I don't think it's a big issue, and I don't think that we ought to be pressing forward with the Anchorage office.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. You can find them at ak4sb.com, although probably easier just to go and argue with him on Facebook. He loves to do that, and Twitter and some of the other places. He's got a weekly column in the Alaska Landmine as well. You can go check that out at alaskalandmine.com. Brad Keithley, thank you so much, my friend.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show continues. Hour 2 dead ahead. Chris Story and more up next. I mean, I'm not necessarily for or against this, Brad. I just, if it's net zero, if it's revenue neutral, apparently, with the exception of maybe some office furniture, okay. But I mean, I just, I don't understand. I'm a huge advocate of remote work. I've been an advocate for years. I've been doing it for years personally. And I just think, why do we have to be trapped in one area where we could do it somewhere else? Other than the fact that I love to watch the people spin their wheels over how Juneau, we've got to leave everything here because otherwise, I mean, a town that has become so dependent on government largesse, I love to see him squirm a little bit, quite honestly. That's just my personal take on it.
Yeah, I think there's a great case. I mean, I think there's a great case for moving the legislature to Anchorage. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to become Juneau-centric here. You want You want the legislators in your largest city. You want them exposed to people when they go to the grocery, ordinary people when they go to the grocery, when they go out to restaurants, and when they drive down the road. You want that sort of interaction. I just think it's different with respect to with respect to the Permanent Fund Corporation. And here's on the economics, Michael. If we've got spare office space in a state office building, why aren't we subleasing it out to the private sector? Why aren't we, reducing government costs? Why aren't we generating some offsetting revenue? Why are we looking for, we got some spare space, let's put another government agency?
Right, exactly. Well, I'm not disagreeing with that either. If we've got tons of vacant office space around here, let's open that up. I mean, why not make a little bit of that money back? It seems to make sense.
Yeah, it's that I think is just I think that's just a specious argument. I mean, if there is an opportunity cost here, if there's spare office space, we could market it, we could monetize it. The fact that calling it free office space just isn't right. There's an opportunity cost to it. From a remote work standpoint, yeah, it's great. I mean, remote work works. You've done it. I've done it. It's something that I think we can accommodate, but we do want those dollars somewhere in Alaska. I mean, we do want those wage dollars or bonus dollars somewhere in Alaska. So,
well, it's interesting. I mean, and the thing is that, as you said, more Kabuki theater. We're fighting over something like that. We're not fighting, but we're arguing over something like this when this is like such a minor thing in the long run. But I gotta be honest, I don't think I would want to work in Juneau, being trapped down there and not being able to go anywhere or do anything, or at least have the opportunity to. But it's one of those things. Again, it's a smaller thing in the whole scheme of the entire organization.
Yeah, so let's compare this issue, the last issue we're taking up today, to the first issue. Not having a special session, not resolving our fiscal outlook, not resolving the PFD issue, letting PFD cuts just continue to roll along and be the source of government funding. Night and day. One's a huge issue. One's a very, very minor issue. That whether this guy's in Juneau or Anchorage is very, very. But we're spending a lot. As a government, as newspapers, and as everything, we're spending a lot more time on that issue than we are on the fact that the governor's not calling a special session and not progressing forward on finding a fiscal resolution.
Well, what do they call that? What's the old axiom? Tripping over a dollar to pick up a dime kind of thing. I mean, that's what we seem to be doing all the time. Jeannie says, why is it important to have wages in Alaska? It's not taxed. And I think the point is, I mean, she does have a point in one way, but another way, it is going into the local economy. So at least there is money flowing in the local economy that way, but it is not taxed, which again is a whole nother issue about, remote workers or out-of-state workers not being taxed on everything as well. So there's two issues there, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah, I think it is. It's important from the standpoint of the private economy. It's important from the standpoint of, the real estate market. Where do people spend their rent money or their mortgage money? It's important from the standpoint of restaurants, from food, just basic spending. Where do they spend their money? And I think if it's state government, if it's state money, we generally should want to have that spent in the state and help bolster the state economy.
Okay, final question for the day. People want to know, what's the micro music festival on your chest there? What's the
This was a festival, music festival that Caitlin Warbelow from Fairbanks, fiddler from Fairbanks, recently hosted up in Fairbanks in April of this year. And one of the things I learned over COVID was you can support live music. You can support music by a number of ways, going to the programs, buying the CDs, but you can also buy merch. And so she had this for sale. And I wanted to be supportive of the festival, and I wanted to be supportive of her. She's an Alaskan musician that's done great things. She's played on Broadway as part of Come From Away musical. So it was, and it's a hoodie. and I like hoodies.
Yeah, and
so.
just a way, yeah, you're a hoodie fan. We know you're a hoodie fan, so it's a way to support him without if you can't, even if you can't get to the festival, you can buy some hoodies or merch or whatever and help support that. And that's great.
That's right. That's right. It's Alaska, right? See, we're
supporting. You're dropping money in Alaska, yeah.
Alaska projects.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's an amazing thing. But you're right, Brad. I mean, it's amazing how much of what we are doing in this state, literally in the long run. And in the short run too, but I mean, it amounts to kabuki. It amounts to nothing. It's storm and strife signifying nothing. We're just getting we're getting spun up around things that don't make any difference in the long run, big differences, while we're letting the large things languish. And it's tough. It's tough we've got to move on to pick up that dollar instead of tripping over it. And
yeah, exactly right. And the first issue we hit today, whether or not we're going to have a special session, whether we're going to resolve fiscal policy, that's the dollar. That's a big issue, one we should be resolving. But yet we're letting that float by while we're arguing about AKLNG, and we're going to argue about whether or not 3 people ought to be in Anchorage as opposed to Juneau.
Brad, thank you so much. We appreciate it, folks. We're out of time. We'll talk to you next week, Brad. Thanks, folks. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common Sense Radio, hour 2 right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of the big radio show. And yes, this is a dumpster fire. That's what it is. What more do you expect from a low-budget radio program? We're continuing on. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets in the weekly top 3. And an interesting discussion on a variety of topics and kind of highlighting the fact that, I talk about going down into the weeds sometimes on Tuesday, and it seems like sometimes we get stuck on these little things or these little distractions away from the major issues. And I think that was kind of the takeaway today from Brad's stuff. We'll talk about that here in a second. Chris' story is coming out in just a few moments. We're going to be talking with him here in a few minutes to get our weekly life coaching lesson. His lesson for today is going to be how to optimize your life. Optimize your life, which of course we, would all love to do, to be more efficient and to get more enjoyment out of life and do all the different things. So we're going to talk with Chris about that here in just a few moments. We'll dive into that with him and get into the details of it. But let's rewind for just a second. And if you missed Brad Keithley, if you're just joining us now and you missed Brad, you can always go back and listen to it on the podcast, which is available, wherever you find podcasts, including my favorite, Spotify. You can go over to Spotify and you can get the podcast there. Set it to subscribe and it'll automatically download it to your device every day, and you can go back and listen to it at your leisure and do that. And there's a bunch of you doing that, so we appreciate you. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you so much for joining us, even if it is a little delayed. I mean, you're not members of the 6 o'clock club, but that's just bragging rights more than anything else. Going back to what Brad was talking about again, and he was kind of discussing, what he considered to be the Kabuki theater of AKLNG and the whole distraction of whether or not we have a satellite office for the Permanent Fund Corporation and everything else. I mean, the details matter. Let's not don't get too twisted to say we shouldn't be paying attention to all this, because it's the details matter. But the problem is that I think that we get locked on a lot of these details, and we don't really, we're not focusing on what is critical. I mean, the governor here has shown an incredible lack of leadership, I guess is what I'll say right off the bat. And I mean, I like Mike Dunleavy. I like him as a person. I voted for him in both elections. I thought he was obviously better. I mean, in the last election, it was ranked choice, so I voted for him second. But I thought he was better than the alternative lower two out there. But the problem is that I agree with Brad's analysis that essentially he came out strong in 2018, 2019. He'd surrounded himself with what I thought were the right people, including folks like Donna Ardwin, who has got a incredible track record around the country, getting states back on track with their spending, and bringing things back from a free market perspective. And she helped him craft this budget that had a lot of the pro big government people wringing their hands left and right. And in the long run, again, I agree with what Brad was saying. He was scarred. He was scarred by what happened in that first go around. He's like a spanked puppy, right? He just twitches at every opportunity. And now he doesn't put his neck out for anything. He doesn't engage the public. He doesn't talk with them or his base about what he's doing. He ran on a platform of a full PFD and has done nothing except talk the talk, right? Yeah, he twitches at Red Silver says over on Twitch, he says he twitches at every opportunity. That's exactly right. He twitches it. It's like every time, he blinks, he flinches. And while I understand that was a hard thing, I mean, facing an immediate recall, the whole, I mean, every news media outlet and talking head and everything else was out there decrying the fact that this was going to be absolute Armageddon and dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, children dying in the streets because of his budget, which was all untrue. It was all hyperbole. It was, I mean, in the long run, we were talking about what was less than a 10% overall budget cut. And it could have been stepped down to even take place over a couple of years instead of, it could have been negotiated to take place over a couple of years. And instead, we end up spending, with a supplemental budget, we end up spending more that year than was than what we actually, the year before. I mean, they ended up cutting, I think, what was it? When it was all said and done, they cut less than $80 million out of a $6 billion budget. And then with a supplemental, they actually then put that $80 million back in. So, I mean, how tough a time was it really? Of course, you had the recall and everything else, and people are all bent out of shape and all the, this is the problem with living in a dependency society, which is what we've created here in the state of Alaska. We have created a state of dependency at many different levels, not just on, normally when you talk about dependency, it's, on the social welfare side, the social safety net, the aid and the payments to people and the welfare and that kind of stuff, medical, Section 8 housing, that kind of stuff. But we have such a weird setup in the states. The only state in the country like this, I think, to this extent, because of the way that our government is funded, that we have corporate welfare as well. We've got companies that are so dependent on that government money. They've built their entire business model on the government spending. And if that is threatened, then they too that was part of the whole thing, right? They're up in arms. You've got the education industrial complex. To borrow a phrase from Eisenhower, or to paraphrase, it's, you've got the education industrial complex where they are taking government money at every turn and always asking for more. I mean, we are funding our universities at a level that no other Western mid to small size state is funding their universities. I mean, like in a tune to like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 3 times as much money. And the fact that he wanted to cut a few $1 million out over the long. At first, if it was 120 million, and then, well, now we'll do it over 3 years, and it's only 75 million. And then, of course, none of that really ever came to fruition. I think they may have cut the first 20 or 30 million out, and after that, it just reversed right back to it. And so what we have is a governor who is not, well, he's not living up to his promises, and he's not looking to support where he could get it. He could get it. He could rally the base. He could engage the public. And he, for a short period of time, he did. He was doing the, essentially he said, I'm going to ignore the news media because they're not friendly to me. No, of course they're not friendly to you. They don't, I mean, they want what the big corporates and the governments and everything else want, because that's where they're making, I mean, they're making money too. And they want to see that advertising dollar flow in and all this other stuff going on. They want to do all that. So of course they're not with you on that. So he said, well, we're going to do that. And then we're going to ignore them, and we're going to go straight to the people. And he did for a period of time. He did the Facebook Lives and other things that he did, which I thought were very well received and a good opportunity to speak directly to the public without the interference of the interpretation of the news media. But that slowly went away as well. And now he's like a hermit. He pops out every now and then, says one or two things, and then leaves. I mean, he said he made a commitment to this program, to come on this program every 6 to 8 weeks to talk to us about stuff. And that slowly whittled away, as it seems to happen almost every time to every politician, especially at the gubernatorial level, where he, for the first year, that's what happens. The first year and a half, it happens. And then in 2 years, it becomes, well, we only see him every 3 months. And then maybe it's only every 6 months. And then it's not that he's on the program for 20 or 30 minutes in kind of a free-form discussion of what's going on. He can only be with me for, the governor can only be with you for about 12 minutes. And he's got some things that he wants to talk about. And then it becomes just another place for him to come out and throw out some talking points and walk away without having any questions or conversations. Why? You have an opportunity. You have a bullhorn. I am offering you, and it's not just about me. I'm just saying this, he has the opportunity in many different ways, but just in this example, he has the opportunity to talk to thousands of Alaskans. This program reaches out to thousands of Alaskans across 20 different translators and radio stations and everything else across the state of Alaska. You have the opportunity to tell your side of the story. This is a friendly audience, a friendly host. I mean, I don't do gotcha questions, even with people that I disagree with. I mean, we have a good discussion, but you had the opportunity. Why would you turn from that? Why would you jettison that? I do not understand this hunker down mode where he just disappears, pops up like a marmot every now and then just goes back down and you don't see him again. If, as Brad said, this is part of a bigger struggle, bigger plan to later on reach for even higher office, for example, maybe to try and run for Senate against Dan Sullivan or Lisa Murkowski, or run for the House or whatever. You're not doing yourselves any favors. I think it was Terry earlier on that said, if this is his track record for governor, I'm not going to be voting for him in any other office. I think many of the base feel that way. I think many of those who supported him as somebody who they believed would fight for them and do that, I think a lot of them feel that way. Why would I step up and vote for him if he is not going to step up for me? I think a lot of the problems that we're having today could be not all solved by the governor, but as Brad says, we have one of the strongest governor systems in the country. We have probably the strongest governor of all the states, with the ability that he has to do things, especially related to fiscal issues. Why wouldn't you stand up and do something? Especially, again, he's in a lame duck session. He cannot run for governor again. And you're still 2 years, 2.5, 3 years out from even any kind of election, even if it's for higher office, like for the Senate, why wouldn't you make the changes you can make now in the beginning? Because if you're worried about the electorate holding hard feelings, the electorate is they've got a very short memory. You do something today, 3 years from now, they probably have mostly forgotten about it. So why wouldn't you do it now? Unless you really didn't believe what you were saying when you ran for office. You really didn't believe in the thing. You were telling us what we wanted to hear. That's all I can see right now. And maybe that's harsh. Maybe that's maybe some people feel that that's unfair of me to paint that on it, but this is all we have. We can only deal with it in the way that we can only call it like we sees it, I guess. In the end is what I'm saying here. But the governor needs to stand up. Maybe he needs to call a special session. I mean, the fact that he said, well, I won't call a special session if the legislature doesn't want to. It's very obvious the legislature doesn't want to, because while they are out of special session, they hold all the cards. They hold all the cards. They hold everything. Now, maybe you call them into special session and they squat and do nothing and throw a tantrum. But again, that's something that they have to have on their records and they have to live with. Maybe that's part of the game you have to play. Call them in and watch them do nothing. And then be able to say, well, otherwise it's just capitulation at this point. And by the way, it's also basically saying that you condone the behavior of what, for example, the Senate did this year in the process, in abrogating and abusing and destroying the process, that you basically condone that kind of behavior. I don't know. It's so frustrating to watch. I would have hoped that the governor would have taken a stronger stand. He didn't. He had the opportunity, and here we are. Here we are. All right, we got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Chris Story is up next, telling us how to optimize our life. We'll continue right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Yep. We did have options. That's why I said he was my second choice. Would have been nice if we had a different outcome on that, but unfortunately it didn't work that way. That's There we go. Lost the audio for a minute, but now we're back. Now we're back. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, there was some kind of static hiccup or something when I was making something. So we're back to it. Chris Story, our guest. We're in the commercial break right now. We're about 2.5 minutes out. My friend, what's going on in Chris Story's world before we get into the life coaching? What's happening in your world? What's going on with all your good stuff? Tell us about all your successes and your projects going on.
Oh my! Could we start with my failures and
That I don't have enough time.
No.
I don't have enough time for that. We have to
Yeah,
do the successes.
it's right.
So, yeah.
You want to bring people down? No, it's all good. What a gorgeous day down here. I mean, there's just ribbons of pink and blue in the sky. I mean, it's just Michael. When you wake up on top of the world, how can you not just be ready to tackle it?
Well, you've got some good news for folks as well. Your latest work is now available on all channels, right? On all channels now.
And what I'm hearing from somebody who it shocked me, they downloaded on Audible The Watchmen as read by Michael Dukes fantastically. You bring it to life in an incredible way. And somebody told me they went hiking the other day alone and listened to it by themselves. They listened to the last hour or so of it alone on this hike out in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, wow. I was working at one of my rental houses in the yard. I was over there reclaiming, doing some stuff, and I had it in my earphones and listening to it. And I was looking over my shoulder. I mean, you were creeping me out. So I couldn't imagine having gone on a hike. But I thought that was a pretty big compliment because she said, I couldn't not find out what happened next. Michael just kept me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, it's a great story. It was a pleasure to perform it for audio, and I'm glad that it's all up. And so it's available on audiobooks on audible.com right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, wherever people download, their audiobooks, you can go to my website, ilovehomeralaska.com/books, and click on it there, or just Amazon Audible. And in fact, I have some promo codes. If we can give away a couple if you'd like. I think that'd be fun.
Nice. Okay. Well, maybe we'll give away a couple promo codes for the book today. We can do that. All right. Chris Story with us. We're about to rejoin the radio. Please like and share, like and follow, do all the YouTube-y things. You could join us and say hi. I see that Bob Dobb Sub Genius is on, and Red Silver Chum over on Twitch, as well as everybody who's on Facebook and YouTube. So like and share, like and follow. Do all that stuff. Let's jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Oh, baby. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. We are doing our thing here. It's a Tuesday, which means Chris Story comes in, the man from Homer, who is not just a radio show guy. He has his own radio show on Tuesdays and Thursdays down on the peninsula. He's also a realtor of some renown, a potter of some. That's pottery, not the other one. Pottery of some renown. And, of course, the unofficial PMA guru of positivity for the Michael Duke Show. Good morning, my friend. How are you this morning?
Well, what would it take to make it official?
Well, it's official. You are officially the Baron, the Baron of Betterment, the guru of positivity, the lifestyle coach extraordinaire, Mr. Story. How are you, sir? What's going on?
That sounds official to me. I'm on top of the world, Michael. But you know what's funny, because I say that, and I love to just jab people in the ribs by saying things like "I was born to live on top of the world," and the truth of it is, it can sound a little obnoxious. The reality is, like every other human being, I have both positive and negative feelings, emotions, days, good days, great days, bad days. Things happen in life. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about optimizing your life for any event, because there's going to be events that happen no matter how positive you are, no matter how optimistic you think you are or are relatively, especially when compared to others, You need to be able to optimize. You need to have a practice and be able to fall back on that practice when times are not so rosy.
Okay. So I want to optimize my life. Tell me, I mean, are there steps? What do I got to do? Is this like a 14-step program or 9-step program? What do I have to do, Chris?
First of all, send me a check to 1005 Carriage Court, Homer, Alaska, 99603. No money involved.
99.90 for only $99.99. Chris is going to help you optimize your life. Go ahead.
Per month, and with 12-month commitment. But the reality is, I think the most important thing is, because we all know people that are super positive, supercharged, seem like they're always happy, seem like they're always on, things always just lean their way. They fall into a ravine, land in a pile of goat scat, and pull out a gold watch. And you're like, what?
Right.
And it just seems like everything just comes so easy. And I'll admit to you, Michael, that I lean towards optimism, and I just kind of wake up that way. It's my tendency is to be optimistic. My tendency to look at the bright side, be a problem solver, recognize, things aren't perfect, but wait a minute, what if we did this, and try to bring solutions to the table in whatever walk of life I'm in at the moment. However, that said, as I said, it's a daily dance, because you can stumble. No matter which way you tend to go, you're gonna stumble at some point, and that's why I suggest we have a practice. It's like kung fu. If you were to get a black belt in karate or kung fu or whatever, you don't stop practicing. You've got to keep going. You have to keep practicing. You have to keep the practice alive, or it will begin to fade away and die away. And so for me, there are certain triggers in my life, in my mind, when I hear myself saying out loud or thinking certain thoughts, I realize, oh, wait a minute. Oh, if I've got a problem with him and her, and I suddenly realize, wait a minute. Okay, it's not all them, it's me. What's going on? And I'll start to go through, okay, what's really happening here, and figure out pretty quick, okay, I need to reorient towards this direction. And suddenly and magically, everybody else changes. It's like, no, it's well within your control. So I think I want to make the case for optimism with 6 simple points. The first one being, if you adopt an optimistic practice, and I don't just mean a one and done mindset shift, I'm talking about a practice of optimism, it will boost your mental health, and it will scientifically, having been proven, reduce stress and the impact of stress on your body and anxiety. And stress should be noted as 2 parts. There's distress and eustress. We're not talking about eustress. Eustress is, if you like roller coasters, that's eustress. That's wonderful. That's exhilarating and thrilling. If you do not like roller coasters, that is putting you in a state of distress and causing release of toxic hormones and chemicals into your body and your brain. So you have to look out for which kind of stress we're talking about, and just understand that if you practice optimism in your life daily, you will boost your own mental health and reduce the distress in your life and anxiety. And that's scientifically proven. We know this.
Okay. So practice that, being optimistic in all levels. Is there, I mean, we don't have a whole lot of time. I don't want to take too far afield, but is there a way to break that down to us for basics? I mean, what do you do to remain optimistic all the time and practice that optimism all the time?
Well, I was going to say, because it isn't remaining optimistic all the time. It's the practice. And so if you think in terms of waking up, if you were and I love martial arts, Michael, and I pretend to, have a black belt. I don't have one. But I have a brown belt, but it's leather.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
Long story short, I have loved ever since I saw my first Bruce Lee movie, probably when I was like 8 or 9. I've been infatuated with martial arts. So I'll come back to that and just say that if you were serious about martial arts, you would probably earlier than later in your day, probably in your first thing in the morning, you would go through the moves, and you would go through whatever practice it is that you set out for yourself and has been trained. Your guru, your mentor, or your sensei would have given you a certain guide to practice in the morning. And so that's what I do with optimism and with positivity. I read positive things first thing in the morning. I do not read the news first thing in the morning. I do not look at what is horrible that's happened around the world first thing in the morning, I protect the morning as a practice for gratitude. I go into a gratitude prayer. I pray for a lot of different things and people in my life, and then I go through a certain stretching regimen, and then I go into drinking coffee and reading for the rest of the morning. But that is my practice to set the day off correctly and right. That doesn't mean that somebody's not going to come at me later that is negative or is disastrous or not what I wanted in life, but I'm more prepared to deal with it because of the practice I put into place in the morning. And not everybody's a morning person.
Sure.
Okay. But I would suggest get up a half hour earlier than you normally do and put this into practice. And the second in the case for optimism would be to change your outlook. Have a positive outlook that will enhance your resilience during stressful times. And by that, I mean to say you have to physically go in and manipulate your brain and your subconscious mind with that positive outlook. You have to physically do that by how you think, even if you're fooling and tricking your subconscious mind. And affirmations are a great way to do that. You can have them written down, or you can just have them memorized, and you just go through these affirmations. The more you say them, the more your subconscious will adopt them, and it will come to fruition in your daily life.
Okay. So again, grabbing control of that computer between your ears and basically just programming it with the positive thoughts and grabbing the negative thoughts and kind of squeezing them out and, just replacing them. Anytime you start to go down the wrong path of thought, you grab it by the throat and you pull it back and you say, no, this is what's going to happen. This is how I feel about it. Right?
Yes, exactly. And the third element of my case for optimism, why you should be an optimist, optimistic people have better health, physical health, mental health, as we already talked about, but also outcomes during cases of illness or whatnot. And the Mayo Clinic has studied it. I mean, countless prize-winning entities have studied this. This isn't just some, PMA schmuck on late night TV suggesting it. It actually is true. And you can trust the science that optimistic people have better physical health and outcomes when faced with disease or malady. So that's another. I mean, if you don't care about better financial or better relationships or better mental outlook or whatever, how about physical health? Maybe that would make the case why you might want to think about becoming an optimist. And then also truly relationships. Better marriage, better relationships, better familial relationships. All of these things are the outcome, or I guess I would say the distillant of having a positive outlook or an optimistic view of the world.
Okay.
Even though it doesn't necessarily come natural to you.
Sure. Okay. All right. But always, at least we feel better about it as we go through it, even if it's not working out quite how we envision. All right. Number 4.
You can't help
but
feel better.
Exactly. Yeah. Number 4.
Well, that is the fourth was the relationships. And then fifth, I would say motivation for your goals. If you've got any sort of goal, and you should, and you've got something you're working towards, I don't care at any age or stage of life, you're working towards something, optimism will be the fuel. Because we all know people that tend to want to give you 10 reasons why it won't work. Then you may be that person. It's time now to at least try to get 2 reasons why it might. So even if it's a 2 to 10 ratio, it's okay. You're going to start building like a muscle, optimism, and it will fuel and provide motivation to going towards achieving whatever it is you want. If it's in the political arena, business, personal health, relationship, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is you're looking to do, become, or have, or place to go, whatever it is, optimism will begin to fuel that in a different way. Even if, again, you still got 7, 8, 9 reasons come to mind why this might not work, you then use that as a trigger to come up with at least 2 or maybe more reasons why it will work and why you are capable of doing this and why you deserve it too. And that's a big piece of it, is so many people don't feel deserving of something better. I remember one time my dad helped my wife and I remodel a commercial building to our home, and we ended up with this like kitchen that was 3 times the size of the kitchen that we'd had in our small apartment. And I just remember thinking and saying out loud, do we deserve this? I mean, it's like, this is a huge tiled, beautiful kitchen. And I caught myself quickly. I slapped myself and I wish I could. I didn't really slap myself, Michael. You need to understand that. I'm just using that violence as a metaphor for
Right.
how I heard it, how it struck my ear, and I was like, "Of course we do." But I had the thought, and I had to stamp it out like a fire.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the sixth one?
You will have a more satisfactory life. You will look back over the good and the bad times, the peaks and the valleys. You will look back over your life having an optimistic outlook throughout, even when you stumble, fallen, whatever. You will look back with greater, deeper satisfaction, more contentment. And I was talking with a guy yesterday who is a contemporary of mine, and very much like we're living two different lives, but almost like in two different tracks, but like making the same moves, and we're about the same age. And we both look back and go, wouldn't do it any different. Yep, made a mistake here. Yep, failed there. Wouldn't do it any different. We feel like
Right.
we've lived more facets of a life than if we had chosen a different path.
Right.
We're very similar. And that's life satisfaction. And again, optimistic outlook is going to help you achieve that at any age or stage of life. And even if you don't get exactly what you set out for, sometimes you end up someplace better.
Well, yeah, and at least the journey is more enjoyable. I mean, even if, and again, not to be negative, but even if you never achieve the life goal, even if you don't achieve but at least the journey itself is enjoyable. It's not a slog. You see people who set a goal and they go and it's just like head down, it's a slog and I'm going to get there.
Mhm.
And if they don't get there, at a certain age or whatever, then they feel like a failure. You didn't enjoy the journey to get there. And you got to have that. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll give you the perfect example just to illustrate what you just said. I thought I really wanted to work with a publisher. I really wanted to get my books in the hand of a publisher. So for years, I delayed. I would send out inquiries. I would send out emails, send out letters, make phone calls. And I really wanted to be picked. Sort of like, pick me from the other side of the room. And the pretty girl always danced with the other guy. They were not dancing with me. So I said, you know what? Forget them. I'll pick myself. And so that could be looked at as a failure, but self-publishing, for example, has gone into a whole different direction now. So
Yeah.
I have two people that I created a team of people. Two are in Chicago. One is in Anchorage. Two are in Anchorage, actually, if I count you, Michael, and I do. And so my publishing team, and then I have a graphic artist. So I have four people in my publishing house. I created my own team under Story Productions. And we just came out with our latest book called The Watchmen. And it's fantastic, getting rave reviews from people that have read it. And I do not care that I wasn't picked. I feel completely satisfied doing this on my own. And I feel optimistic about its outcome, especially because the new Audible version narrated by Michael Dukes just dropped. But I feel content with it. I'm no longer worried that I wasn't picked by one of the big six houses. I don't care.
Right.
Chances are good I probably wouldn't have enjoyed working with them.
Exactly. Well, now you're calling your own shots as well, which is even better. All right. Well,
Yes.
We're out of time for today. You do have a couple codes to give away. Are you just going to choose people at random who text you, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, just text me the word man with two N's, MANN, and I will send the first, I'll do 10. The first 10, I'll send you a free copy of the audio book called The Watchmen, read by Michael Dukes, 299-7653. Just send me the word man with two N's, and I will send you back the code.
299-7653. If you text the word man, you get a free audiobook of Chris Story's latest book, The Watchmen, narrated by yours truly, which I don't know if that's a plus or a minus. We'll figure that out later on. Chris Story, thank you so much, my friend. It's good to talk with you. Hold the line for just a second, folks. We got one more segment coming up. We're going to be back. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Chris Story is our guest one more time. I don't know if Bob is still with us on Twitch or not, but he asked a question. Put your realtor cap on for a second, Chris. Can you ask your guest what's the best way to come up with a down payment for a commercial property purchase? So you're a real estate genius. Tell folks what is the best way to come up with a down payment for a commercial I mean, I'm assuming savings, but is there a good plan there?
Well, I mean, okay, so you pointed out the obvious, but maybe people don't want to wait 5, 10 years or whatever it's going to take to assemble that. So what I would do is think in terms of, well, the tagline of our show, The Backyard Millionaire, is essentially you cannot save your way to a fortune, but you can invest your way to wealth if you can learn to save. So obviously savings is a part of it. However, commercial properties can be a little bit more expensive on their face. And also as a result of that, you're going to need 25% down probably, plus some expensive closing costs. Appraisals are very expensive on a commercial property. So what about syndicating? What about creating a limited partnership? What about getting together 5, 6, 7, 8 people or 3 people, depending upon what you've got saved already, and forming a syndicate and saying, okay, guys, I'll be the general manager of this partnership. I'm bringing us the deal. So you can put together your deal subject to financing and so forth. And then when it comes time in the documentation to put who will take title to this property, who's the buyer, you say your name or your limited liability corporation, whatever you buy, and then or assigns, such that you can create the entity after you've put the deal together. So long as you think you've got some people in the wings, you don't want to do this without a net underneath you. You want to know at least a few people that might be willing to loan you the money, the virtue of this, or via this new syndicate that you're forming, of which you're the managing partner. People do this all over the country in commercial or large residential projects and properties. But the reality is you got to have something you bring to the table. Maybe you brought the deal to the table. Maybe you don't bring any money, but you're just bringing the deal and the knowledge and the willingness to manage the whole thing. Then that could be a great way to do it without a lot of money out of your own pocket. But I would think in terms of also borrowing that money. Let's say you don't want to syndicate. You say, man, I can't get along with myself, let alone 2, 3, 5 other people. Okay, is there someone in your life, a hard money kind of lender, somebody who's got money, they loan it to people, they like it securitized by real estate, and they'd be willing to take a second position? The bank will never take a second position, but maybe your friend or this lender, hard money lender, just a person with a lot of money out there, and there's plenty of them, maybe they'll take a second if the position and the equity position is right. The other piece of it would be, can you do owner financing and just minimize the amount down? And just say, look, and I just did a deal like this two years ago for Tiffany and I. It happened to be commercial. And we talked with the folks and they said, well, this is what we'd want down. We'll carry you for X number of years. And I said, well, how about this? And we created an alternate plan. And they said, okay, here's one thing we did. We actually increased the interest that they were going to be earning. What they were willing to accept a certain amount of interest. We said, well, in a little of a larger down payment, how about we give you a little bit more interest, bumped that up, and then we also extended it out for a number of years. So it was a very secure investment for us. There's a lot of ways to manipulate those figures such that you don't have to come up with it all yourself.
I mean, that's, and this is solid advice. This is stuff that you guys would pay big money for. So that's good. Thank you, Chris, for that. He said to thank you, by the way. He said, thank you. He said, he said to ask you if you're talking about REIT, which I don't know what that is, but REIT.
No, that's a real estate investment trust. And I'm not talking about that. You could create one, I guess. REITs are typically, larger, much larger. I'm talking about something you would own and control versus putting a little bit of money into a real estate investment trust. If you wanted to create your own real estate investment trust, maybe, but I just mean syndicating out the down payment, the portion with which you do not have, in which case then everybody's getting a taste in the overall ownership, but you'd want to structure it such that you're the manager, you're the leader of this whole group, and
have an option and have an option to buy out later, or some kind of pathway, to sole ownership in the future, right?
Absolutely. Securitizing your own, so you could never be forced out, or none of the partners can sell out without your written express permission. You'd always have a first right of refusal, such that you don't end up with 8 partners down the road you don't know, like, or trust.
Right.
Because you got to start this out with people that you do know, like, and trust.
Wow, we should do a whole show on real estate investment. That's a fascinating topic, and I learn something new every day. So that's good stuff. Chris, thank you, my friend.
My pleasure.
Appreciate you coming on board. Thanks for being part of it today.
Okay. You have a good day, Michael.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good to hear from you. Chris Story, the man from Homer, giving us a little bit of advice here on the way down. We are 30 seconds out from rejoining the radio, which we will do here in just a hot second. Please like and share the show. Like and follow the show page if you want to be part of it. We'd love to join up on that. I was going to open up the phone lines, but I don't think we have enough time to do that here this morning. So we'll just kick things off, and I'll do a little chit-chat here in the final segment. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Well, Chris already just texted me and said he already got the first 10 books out. So 10 of you will be getting some download codes from audible.com for Chris Story's latest book called The Watchman, from Audible, narrated by me. So if you can't get enough of my voice in the morning, you can put it in your earbuds at night. And this book is good. It's a little bit spooky. It's a little bit dark, but it is a great read. And I hope you enjoy it. For those of you that won copies of it, if you want, you can go over to audible.com and just type in The Watchman with 2 N's, and put Chris Story, The Watchman, and you will find it there. And he's written a winner right there. A lot of fun, a lot of good stuff in that story. And I really, really enjoyed performing it. Hopefully you enjoy reading it or listening to it, consuming it, as the case may be. So good stuff. During the break, we also got some great real estate advice from Chris. And because somebody who was on Twitch asked a question about buying commercial property and saving up and how do they do it? What's the best way? And Chris really broke it out. And I thought did a really good job of giving us some great advice on that. Maybe we should have Chris back on to talk specifically about real estate, because that's his date. The guy's, he makes me tired. I mean, he's again, he does the real estate, he does the radio, he does the positivity thing where he goes around and speaks to people, and he does pottery professionally and all this kind of stuff. So it makes me tired. The guy's out there. I mean, I'm busy, but he's busy too. So it's good. It's good stuff. And we appreciated Chris coming on board and talking about it. Chris in the chat room, not Chris Story, but Chris in the chat room says a good realtor can help anyone buy commercial property with innovative financing. And I agree. So maybe we should have Chris back on one day to just talk real estate stuff, because it's interesting. I mean, it's one of the few ways to really grow wealth in the long run that's, I think, really approachable for most people. Most people, if you have a decent income, middle American, if that still exists, middle American income, you can expand your wealth with real estate. I've learned that Chris has got a book out that talks specifically about this called The Backyard Millionaire, which is also available on Audible, also read by yours truly. But it's a great book on that as well. And you should go out there and check it out and get yourself a copy of it. And do it. And yes, it'll be a way to get yourself out of the 9-to-5. If you're tired of the 9-to-5 grind, that's the way to do it. So anyway, all right. So what else we got left over today that we didn't get to? Man, I don't know what is going on down in Anchorage. I mean, I'm so thankful that I don't live in Anchorage proper itself. I work in Anchorage, but I'm watching all these news stories flash across the newswire about Anchorage that, I guess it's one of the reasons why I carry a gun all the time, because this place apparently is getting as dangerous as, I don't know, probably not, but it feels like it's as dangerous as downtown LA. Anchorage police are investigating 2 shootings late on Sunday that left 2 people injured, and they were reported about 2.5 hours apart in separate locations. Both people who were shot reported that they did not see the shooter at all. No arrests have been made, and a spokesperson for the police department said that it's not known if the shootings are related. They both took place in East Anchorage and they were about 2 miles apart. The first report came in about 9 a.m. on Sunday. A woman was walking in the area of Creekside Park on East 6th Avenue when she was shot once in the upper body. She was transported to the hospital for treatment. It was not life-threatening, and she's, pulling through. And they searched they got a dog, they got a drone, they searched around. They couldn't find anybody. They searched this is at 9 p.m. So they searched for about 5-6 hours trying to figure out where this shooter was. They couldn't find it. But halfway through the search, about 11:30 p.m., there's another report of a shooting in the 700 block of Pine Street near Rush and Jack Springs. That's about 2.5 miles away, where a man was walking on the street when he was shot in the lower body and then transported to the hospital for treatment of several wounds, also described as non-life-threatening. And it's like, what? The police department, I thought the police department response was kind of classic on this. They said, asked if there was any danger to the public. The police said, the spokesperson said, regardless of their location, citizens should always be aware of their surroundings. Basically saying situational awareness is key. Like, don't have your nose buried in your phone. Be paying attention. That if you see something, say something. The public is asked to notify police immediately of any suspicious or criminal activities. Then a man and a child were injured yesterday. That was on Sunday. Then on yesterday, a man and a child were injured in a shooting in the Mountain View area. They responded to reports of a shooting North Lane, 500 block of North Lane Street, just before 3 p.m. In an update shortly after 4, they said multiple law enforcement units were responding to the area to help search for the suspect, including a SWAT unit, a TAC unit, and a crisis negotiation team. The victim, they said, they believe an adult male fired at another man outside, striking him at least once. The victim fled on foot, with the suspect chasing him. He entered a building, and the suspect fired at least once more from outside. The bullet struck a small child inside the apartment. They were both taken to the hospital for treatment. Then the suspect fled the scene, and the search for him is ongoing. They say they don't know if it's connected to the 2 shootings on Sunday, but reason number 413 why I carry a gun. I mean, this is what's going on in Anchorage. I mean, what is happening? There was another shooting last week. A woman shot somebody dead over in Mountain View. Now, that's a rougher part of town, but still, what's going on down there in Anchorage? Again, I guess I'm just happy that I'm not living in I guess Los Anchorage, the big city of Alaska, because who needs that kind of stuff on your mind? And yes, you should be aware of everything that's going on around you all the time. You should be constantly paying it. It amazes me how many people wander around kind of in a fog, completely oblivious to their surroundings. That blows my mind more than anything else. It's not like I'm paranoid, but I'm at least walking around understanding what's going on around me. And, eyeing people that give me the heaves, you know what I mean? Oof. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, Anchorage has become another crappy liberal big city. Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's just the big city part for sure. I don't know what that means, but there's a lot of stuff going on in Anchorage that I don't need to deal with right now. All right. Well, tomorrow we'll be joined by State Senator Mike Shower. May have another guest in the first hour. We'll see what we come up with today. Thanks for coming in and joining us. The Michael Duke Show continues tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, Red Silver over on Twitch says population density causes a lot of problems. I mean, between the divisiveness of what we're seeing over everything these days in politics and everything else, and the anger and the population density, maybe that's true. But yeah, and drugs are part of the problem. Sure, that could be it as well. But when you go forth today, I suggest you pay attention to everything around you, and you go forth armed. It's always been my argument as well. Thank you so much, my friends, for coming on board. Another great show, another great day. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. We will see you tomorrow.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Work that way. Executive.